section, we'll talk about Lightning Data Service, wire adapters and functions. So this is the second approach by which you can fetch the data from the Salesforce. And in the previous video, we already have seen the base Lightning component approach. We know the base Lightning component approach is the easiest approach, but you don't have much control over the data there and you can't do much customization. So whenever you want to perform some customization on the data, or you want to fetch the raw data like for pick list, or you want to fetch the record information or object information, you can use the second approach, that is the wire adapters and function. And to understand the wire adapter and function, you should know who will provide this, basically the feature adapters as well as the function. So in LWC there is a module that is called Lightning UI API. This module gives us the different wire adapters as well as the JavaScript functions. And this module is built on the top of user interface API, and that API supports all the custom objects and many standard objects. So if you want to check which all objects it supports, you can look into the documentation. And UI API modules is of 4 types basically. So the first type is UI Object Info API. We're gonna use this module very heavily to fetch the pick list value, and in this module you can get the object metadata as well. The second module is UI List API, that is still in the beta version, but this also we're gonna look this module, and we use this module to get the record and the metadata for a list view. The third one is the UI Record API, and the most important, I would say, the module which help you to create, retrieve, update, delete, refresh the record without writing a single line of Apex. And we will see this module in a very detailed manner. And the fourth module is UI App API, and that is pretty new and it's also in the beta version, and we use this module to get the data and the metadata for apps displayed in the Salesforce UI. So now we know at high level, in this module we're gonna cover about these 4 modules, and as I said, the module name is wire adapters and the JavaScript function. So before using this adapter and the function, we need to understand the wire services. So in the next video, we'll talk about wire services. So I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we'll talk about wire service, and we'll see how to fetch the user details using the wire service. So wire service is a service that is built on top of Lightning Data Service. Lightning Data Service we already have seen in the previous videos. LWC component use wire in their JavaScript class to read the data from the wire adapters, and the wire adapters we will get it from the Lightning UI API modules. Wire service is reactive service, and to explain this reactive term, I have a video in the upcoming lectures. And the wire adapter defines the data shape that the wire service provision in an immutable stream. From the interview point of view or from learning point of view, wire service is very important. You should know the syntax very well, because right, in all real-time projects you use wire service very heavily to fetch the data, to perform some action on the data. So let's look at the syntax first. As we know, wire service accept the adapter, and so that we need to import the adapter. So we can import the adapter from the module. Adapter module is nothing, is the Lightning UI API module. Okay, from those modules we will import some adapter or a function, and we will pass those adapter to a wire, @wire, and to use @wire we have to import wire, that we'll see, and here we'll pass some configuration. And once the service hits the data or hits the backend and bring the data, that time we need someone to listen to the data, right? So to listen that, we can use a property or a function. So the syntax is very simple. First you need to import the wire, then you need to import the adapter, then you have to write @wire, then adapter name, and then pass the configuration. And once this service brings something to listen the data, we will use property or a function. So let's go to the VS Code and see how to achieve this. So I am in my VS Code now. So let's create a fresh component, and I will give this name wire demo user detail. Now our component is ready. So the first thing what we're gonna do is we'll create an HTML and we'll create a card. Lightning card, we'll say title user detail using wire, and after this we'll add quickly a div with to give some padding. And now what we're gonna do is we'll just print a user ID here, and we'll come to our JavaScript or a class, we'll create a property user ID. So right now nothing is assigned to this user ID. So let's import the ID from the user. So we already seen how we can get the user information, current user information. So I'll say I want to import ID from @salesforce /user/ID, and we'll assign this ID to user ID. And in the details, what we're gonna do, we'll say true, and we'll add the targets. We can add the target app page only, and let's deploy this using the same command sfdx force source push. So the component is deployed, and for this I already create a new app page. So I'll go and edit and place this component quickly, and we'll search for a component name wire user demo, place in the first column, save this, come back. So now we are getting the user ID. So now we just set up by which like we create the card, we use the user/id to fetch the logged in user ID. So I have the ID, I'll just copy this ID. I'll go back to my VS Code, and here what we're gonna do is we'll save this ID here. Okay, and now we'll start our actual topic, that is wire service. So now I have a user ID and I want to fetch the user details. Basically we can't fetch email and name in this way. This approach with the reference, we can fetch only the logged in user ID. So I am going to use this ID to fetch the user other details like email or name. For that I need to use a wire service. So the syntax is you have wire @wire, then you have adapter, then you have adapter configuration, and then you have approach either to go with property or function. I'm just writing the syntax right now, and this adapter configuration is in object format. Okay, so this is the syntax right now. I'll just comment it out. So first thing, we need to import the wire. So to import the wire, import type wire here from the LWC module, and then we'll say @wire. Now we need the adapter. There are different types of adapter. We'll talk about each and every adapter in the upcoming videos. So to understand wire adapter, right now I'm importing an adapter that is called get record. So I'm saying import get record there is a module called get adapter called get record, and that you can import from a module lightning slash UI record API. So once you have this adapter, you will pass this adapter here. Then you need to pass the configuration. Configurations are the params basically that is mandatory to pass with the adapter, or you can think like this adapter expects something you to pass, so we'll pass those adapter. So it's expecting you to pass the record ID for which you want to fetch the details, and in our case we already have the ID here. I'm just passing the hard coded ID right now. We just see this is the user ID that we are getting, and then we need to pass the fields that you want to fetch from this record. Okay, so what all the fields we want is we want user, from user object fetch the name, and we can say from user object fetch the email, and once our signature of wire is ready, we need some property or a function to cache the data. So the easiest way, and I usually prefer, is the writing function. So we'll write a function just below this line. So we'll say user detail handler. It will take response, okay, and will console that response. Will not perform any action, will just perform console the response. So I'll repeat it again. First you need to import the wire, use the @wire, pass the adapter. In our case it's a get record, we are importing from UI record API. Then you need to pass the adapter configuration. Adapter configuration are the parameters that get record is expecting from you. So we are passing the record ID, because to fetch the record you need to tell him from which record ID you want to fetch the details, and you need to tell him what all fields you want to fetch. So we are telling from the user fetch the name, from the user fetch the email, and once this action completes it will come to this method immediately, and it will take the response, and we are printing the response. So let's deploy this and see what it prints in the console. So I'm in my app, I'll refresh the page. We'll do the right click, select inspect. We'll go to the console. Here you will see our response that we are printing. Let me zoom it a little bit. So in the response we have two properties, data and the error. Data further has many things like API name that you're calling, what all the fields you are calling, like email and the name, and what is the value of the email, or what is the name of the user who logged in. And if I hover here it will be user only, you can see. So that's what we are getting, the logged in user details, Salesforce group @gmail, it's an email ID. So we go back to our VS Code, and now what we're gonna do is we'll store the data. Now in most of the examples you would have seen people are destructuring it here. Even in the Salesforce documentation they are writing the code like this. So many people are confused about how they are writing directly data and error. This data and the error are the properties that are hard coded by Salesforce in the wire response. So you can use this way. This is the shorthand notation or object destructuring. Otherwise, if you don't want to use it, you can use in this way as well. Response dot data and response dot error. You can store it in a variable data like that. Okay. There are many ways, but to understand this, that's why I went with the very simplest way. So now let's destructure it here only, because it gives us a clear thing. So it will either bring the data or the error, and we'll say if data is available, then perform this action. If error is there, let's console the error. So we'll say console.error, just print the error. And if the data is available, what we need, we'll go back and look if this is the data. Within that data, what field we want the fields to be there. So we'll just come here, we'll say this dot user details equal to data dot fields, and we'll create a property user details on the top. Okay, I'll remove this one, we don't need anymore. So I'll say user detail is a property that is initialized, not initialized, so by default it is initialized with undefined. Once the data is available, take the fields, all fields, and assign to the data user detail property. And now we'll print those properties on our HTML. So we'll say template if true. First we need to check whether the user details are available or not. So that's why we are using if true directive. And then we'll print email is user detail dot email dot value. Similarly, we'll print the name as well on the screen, and you can fetch it using user detail dot name dot value. So let's deploy this and see how it works. In the meantime, I'll repeat it again. We are looking into the wire service and we are using the get record adapter. Whichever method that you're getting or whichever you are importing from the UI module and you're passing with the wire, we called it as a adapter basically. So get record is adapter here. We are passing the record ID of the logged in user, and that we are getting from the path @salesforce/user/id, and we are telling this get record to bring the field's name and the email. Once the data comes, it comes to the wire as a function user detail handler, and from that we are destructuring and we are checking if data is there, take out the all fields from the data and assign it to user details. And in the HTML we are using user detail dot email dot value, user detail dot name dot value. So let's go and refresh the page now. We close the console, and now on the screen you can see email Salesforce Troop @gmail, and the name is user. The benefit of using the function is you can console the data that is coming, right? So but in the syntax I showed you, you don't need what say function, you can go with the property approach as well. So we can look into the property approach now. So for that, what we'll do is I'll create another wire and we'll use the same signature because the syntax will be same, and we'll say here user detail property. So it immediately receive whatever the response is coming. Okay, it will store in this, and in the HTML I'll say user detail using wire as function. I'll copy this card and paste it below. I'll say as a property, and here the response is stored in this property user detail property. So we're gonna use, first we'll check whether the user detail property dot data is available or not, because as I already said, data and the error are the hard coded field in the wire service. So every time you will get the positive response in the data property and the negative response in the error property. So once the data is available, we'll say user detail property dot data dot fields dot email dot value is there or not. Similarly, we'll do this for the another one for name. So here we haven't tried anything specific to our function. We just use the property. The property will receive the response directly. Response has data and error. So we are checking whether the data is there or not. If data is there, go to the field property. Within the field property, go to email and fetch the value. So let's deploy this and check whether the wire as a property is working or not. But I always recommend always start writing your code with the function print, because writing function and debugging with the function is easy, but debugging with the wire as a property is really tough. And so always write this, and once you are good with the integration, your data is mapping correctly, then you can remove this to a property. Okay, so it's deployed. Let's go to our code, refresh the page. And now you can see that with the wire as a property is also working fine. Now we have seen how wire as a property works, how wire as a function works, how we pass the adapter. One very important thing that I want to explain here is right now we are passing the hard coded thing. Okay, and tomorrow somebody changed a property or a field name from the Salesforce side, right? So your code will not understand what happened, it will start breaking immediately. So Salesforce recommend us never give the reference hard coded, always import the reference, and that's the best approach, and everybody should follow that approach. So let's import the reference. Okay, so first reference we want to import is the name field. The benefit of the reference is if somebody updates the field from the Salesforce side, it automatically map that reference. So we'll say @Salesforce from schema we want user.name. So user is your object, name is your field. Similarly, we want email field and we want email. So we'll say we can pass it like this, name field and email field, and we'll replace it here as well. And there is a one further better way is we always do const fields equal to, just assign it in the top outside your class and just map it like this. And in JavaScript, if your key and value is same, you don't need to define it again and again. It is a shorthand notation. So basically it's equivalent to this. Okay, so let's deploy this now and see whether the things are working or not. So always use reference instead of using the hard-coded object.field name. And let's see if it works or not. Now it's deployed. Let's go and refresh the page. And it will work in the same way. So the reference is working totally fine. So let's understand what types of reference we can use. So there are different ways to import the reference. So let's see first the standard object, how you can refer to a standard object. For that, we need to use @Salesforce/schema/object name. An example is like @Salesforce schema account, because these different types of references we're gonna use heavily with the wire service and the adapter. The second way is to import reference to Salesforce custom object, and to custom object the syntax is same. You just need to pass the property __c, that is our custom object name. Syntax is exactly same for custom object and the standard object. Then we have the fields, how we can import the reference of the Salesforce fields. We have just now seen we have given the object name as user and the field name as name. Another example, you can see account.name, or if you talk about a custom object.field name, then you have to give your custom object that ends with __c, in this case property __c dot name. And if you have a relationship in the field and you want to import that, then you need to write object dot relationship dot field. And for this example, you can use account is my object. Account has a relationship with owner, and we want to fetch the name field of the owner. So you can write account dot owner dot name, that is object dot relationship dot field. So these are the different ways by which you can import the reference of the fields or the object, whether it's a custom object or a standard object, and you can reference to a relationship as well. So these concepts, whatever we learn in this video, we're gonna use going forward throughout our lectures. We'll use heavily the wire service, different types of adapters and the function. Now in the next video, we'll talk about the wire as a reactive service, and we'll prove how wire service is a reactive in nature. So I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we'll learn how wire is a reactive in nature. Okay, so let's go to our VS Code, and we are referring the same demo that we have used in previous video. You might have think like, why I'm using a hard-coded ID if I already have a user ID available, right? So let's replace this ID and see what will happen. So I'll replace this ID. I'll say this dot user ID and this dot user ID, and let's deploy this. Now it should be dynamic, right? So on load, ID will come and the user ID will get the ID, and this record ID should have that user ID. And let's go to our org. Let's refresh the page. And now you see we got the error, and it says cannot read property user ID of undefined. So why it's so? Let's go to code and let's try to understand what's happening. So when we are importing something from a module, and in this case we are importing ID from a module user slash ID Salesforce user, that is a asynchronous process, right? It's going and fetching that ID, and before this ID comes, it triggers the get record adapter. Basically it called the get record method, and that time user ID was undefined, and this method expects some ID to be passed. That's why it throws an error. So how to solve this issue actually? And to solve this issue, we have an approach by which we prove wire is reactive in nature. Reactive means once the data available, immediately update it. Okay, so to make this property a reactive, we have to use a dollar in front of the property. Just remember, maximum time people do the mistake, they will write dollar this dot user ID. When we make a property as is reactive, we'll say dollar and the property name without this, and it should be in the quotes. And we call the wire service reactive in part because it supports reactive variables, and we are prefixed with dollar. And if a reactive variable change, the wire service provision the new data. So as soon as that it comes, it immediately hits and bring the data. So let's deploy and see how our reactive properties are working. And if it works, it proves wire service is a reactive in nature because its properties are reactive. The time it gets the value, immediately it fetches the data. So let's go back to our org and refresh the page. And now you see it started working. And this is how we use reactive variables in the wire service. And now this approach also we're gonna use heavily with the record IDs, because our record we will fetch the so many record IDs dynamically and will assign those IDs dynamically. So this is all about wire service now, and now we'll look into the different types of wire adapters and we'll play around with all adapters in more detail. So I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we'll talk about getObjectInfo wire adapter, and this adapter we import from UIObjectInfo API module. So let's see when we use this adapter. We use this adapter whenever we want to fetch the metadata about a specific object, and this adapter response include metadata that tells us about the object's field, child relationships, record type, themes, and many more. So the syntax is almost same that we have seen in the wire service syntax. So first we have to import the wire, then we have to import the adapter. In this case, the getObjectInfo is our adapter name, and we are importing that adapter from UIObjectInfo API module. Then we'll pass that adapter name to a wire service. As wire service expects some wire configuration as well, like adapter configuration, and here we have to pass the object API name that tells this adapter for which object you have to fetch the metadata. And here we are passing the account object, and to pass that we have to import that reference of the account object. And once the data comes, you can cache the data either in the property or a function. So let's back to our editor and let's create a new component called getObjectInfo demo. So now our component is ready. We'll follow the same steps that we know. We need a wire service. We'll call the wire service here. Wire service need an adapter, so we import the adapter, and we are learning the adapter getObjectInfo. So we'll import that getObjectInfo from module called lightning/UIObjectInfo API. Once the adapter is available, we'll pass that adapter to a wire service. This adapter need some adapter configuration, and that configuration is the object API name that tells this adapter for which object you have to bring the metadata. So we'll pass the account object, and for this we have to bring the reference of the account object, and we can bring the reference using Salesforce schema module. Schema/account we can say. So this is our account, we get the reference, we are passing the reference, and to hold the data we either to use a wire as a property or a function. And the easiest way, I told you in the debugging or to visualize the data, always first write the wire as a function. So we'll write object info is my function name. That function either will receive data or the error, and will print if data is there, print the data. If error is there, print the error. And let's add the configuration as well. So we'll change this is exposed to true. We'll add the targets and we'll change it to app page. Right now we are testing against app page. We have the code. Right now we don't have anything in HTML. Let's quickly add the card here. So I'll create a card, lightning card, title get record info adapter, and we'll add some padding around the card, and let's deploy this. Component is deployed. Let's place the component to our page. Wire services, hit page. Let's search for our component name, get object info demo. Let's place it to the second column. Let's save this. Let's go back. Card is visible on the page. Let's go to the console. And now it's printing one object here. And now you can see it's giving us the whole metadata. What's the API name? What's the child relationship? What's the default record type? What are all the fields this object has? Apart from that, record type infos, theme info, what's the color of the theme, what's the icon URL, and everything you can get in with this single adapter, that is get object info adapter. So for right now, we can just print the default record type ID on the screen. So let's go back and say default record type ID, and we'll say this dot record ID equal to data dot default record type ID, and let's initialize this property on the top. Initially it will be undefined because we are not initializing this, and once the data comes from the data, will fetch the default record type ID and map to the property that we have created, and that ID will show on the screen. So let's deploy this and see if we are able to see the default record type ID. And most of the time we use this adapter to fetch the default record type ID because we need this ID to fetch the pick list values. So now it's deployed. Let's go and refresh the page. And now you can see that the ID is printing. And now we can, if we want, we can remove this everything and we can directly use the wire as a property. I'll remove this and we'll say object info dot data dot default record type ID. So it will print the record type ID, and we can see like this, and we'll put this in the div. That's a better thing, and we'll copy once again and paste it below, and we'll say object API name, and here we can say API name. So now we convert our wire as a function to a property because we already tested it was printing in the console, the data is coming and it's fetching the data correctly. So we just change this card to a property now instead of function. So let's deploy and test whether the API name and the default record type ID is printing on the screen or not. So it's deployed now. Let's go back and refresh the page, and it throws an error, and that's a good error because this is an asynchronous approach, right? It will go and fetch the data, and before fetching this HTML start rendering, and that time default record type ID is not available. So what we can do is we'll grab this in the template if true directive, and we'll say if object info dot data is available, then only load the template inside this. We'll just move this and let's deploy this. These are the errors that you will face in real time, and these are the solution that you're gonna use. So now it's deployed. Let's go and refresh the page again, and now you can see that default record type ID is coming correctly and the object API name is account. So just a quick recap, like get object info we only use to fetch the object's metadata, and we're gonna use this adapter heavily for the pick list where we need to have the get default record type ID. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we'll talk about GetObjectInfo's wire adapter, and this adapter also comes from the UIObjectInfo API module. So as we have seen in the previous video, the GetObjectInfo wire adapter we use to fetch the metadata of a single object, and we use GetObjectInfos when we want to fetch the metadata for multiple objects in a single component. And it works in the same way, but this gives a freedom for us to fetch the metadata for the multiple object. The syntax is almost same except the adapter name. So the adapter name this time will be GetObjectInfos. We'll pass that infos. Earlier we were passing the object API name with a single object. Now we are passing multiple object. So we are using the array bracket. So let's go to the VS Code and see how it works. We'll use the same code or the component that we used in the previous video. So this time, first we'll import this GetObjectInfos, that is our adapter name. Then what we're gonna do is we'll create a wire service. In wire we'll pass the GetObjectInfos. Then we will call the object API name, and we'll import another object. We can call it as opportunity object from @Salesforce schema /opportunity. So now we have two objects. Let's create another field called object API names, and we'll map those imported object references here, and we'll pass this as a reactive property. There is a reason to pass it as a reactive property. There may be a chance the reference of account object is available first, and the later point of time we are getting the reference of opportunity object. It's always good to pass dynamic things as a reactive property. So we are passing it as a reactive property, and we can handle this using the wire as a function property. We'll say when the data comes, just check if data is there or not, and in the console can print data. And in the HTML, what we can do is we just create a card, and we'll say the title GetObjectInfoAdapter and use a div with the class and leave that div empty for time being. So let's deploy this and see whether the data comes for the multiple objects or not. So I already refreshed the page. Now you can see the card is there. Let's go to console, and in console let's see the object that we are printing. Now it's giving us the two objects, one for account. Now you can see API name account. The second object is for API opportunity, and from here you will get the same metadata that we were getting using for a individual object using GetObjectInfo wire adapter, but we are using here the GetObjectInfos, so we are getting multiple objects basically. So let's go and use this and show on the screen the data that is coming. So we can store this data into a variable or the local property. I'll say object pose, and I'll store this in the this dot object infos equal to data, and we'll go to the HTML. And in the HTML what we can do is, if you see here, basically result is an array. So if something is in the array format, we can run the loop on the template. So here we'll run the loop. Now we'll say template for each, and you have the property object infos. Run the loop on the object infos dot result, and that is result, I guess. Results, you can copy the name results. Run the loop on this. Each item, we'll call it as obj object, and then what we're gonna do is we'll create a div, and within this div we'll create another div. We'll say object API name, and we'll say obj dot result dot API name, and it's showing error because we haven't used a key property that is important for the for each loop. And we'll say this is our key name, or we can use the API name because API name will always be unique as our key. We'll copy this and we'll print the default record type as well, and for that also it will be under the result, and the time it loads, that time the object infos.result will not be available, so it's better we use the if true directive as well. So we are telling run the loop only if the data is available in the object infos property. This is the local property we are using. Don't confuse with the adapter name. Adapter name is starting with get. So adapter name is get object infos. Object info is the property that we are using to store the data that is coming from the wire adapter. So let's deploy now. It's deployed now. I refresh the page, and now you can see it's repeating 2 times. First object API name is account, then record type ID, then second object API name is opportunity, and the record type ID. So this is how we fetch the multiple data, metadata basically for multiple object, and for that we use get object infos. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we'll talk about get picklist values adapter. And this wire adapter we can import from a Lightning UI object info API. And this wire adapter is very common nowadays in LWC, and we use this wire adapter to get the picklist value for a specified field. Before this adapter, we used to call the apex and then we used to fetch the picklist values. But with this adapter, we don't need to write a single line of apex code. Let's look at the syntax. Syntax is very similar to our previous wire adapters. We import the wire from LWC module. Then we import get picklist values, that is our wire adapter, from a Lightning UI object info API. And then we call the wire, pass the wire adapter name. And here the wire adapter configuration basically is record type ID. We need to pass the record type ID, and don't get confused between the record ID and the record type ID. And then we have to pass the field API name for which field you want the picklist value, right? So in this example, or in this syntax we are showing, I want the picklist of industry field. From where I can get from the account object dot industry. So we'll pass that reference to our field API name, and we'll give our picklist values. So for a note, like record type ID is the ID of the record type, and we can use the object info default record type ID property, which is returned from a get object info. So we have already seen how get object info wire adapter works. So that adapter returns us the default record type ID, and we're gonna use that record ID and pass it to a get picklist wire adapter, and then we'll get the picklist of a specified field. So let's go to our VS Code and let's quickly create a demo. So let's create a component now. I give this name get picklist values demo. Now my component is ready. We'll start with this basic syntax. We need a wire, and then I need to import my adapter, that is get list values, and from Lightning /UI object info API pi should be small, p should be caps. So get pick list values, my adapter is ready. Now let's call this wire adapter name, adapter configuration. Adapter configuration is record type id. Here the id will get passed, then we need to pass the field API name, and we can, let's fetch the pick list for the industry field. So I'll create a reference of industry field on the top. I'll say industry field is coming from @Salesforce / schema / account is my object name, and then the API name of the field dot industry. Industry R is there. So now I imported it. Then after this we have to mention whether our wire will be a property or a function. I'll use it as a function. It will receive data and error, and if data is there, to will console this data, and if error is there, will console error. Now we have set up, but right now we don't have a record type ID. So how we can get that record type ID? So if you would have seen our previous wire adapter, that was get object info, that returns usually the default record type ID. So what we're gonna do here is we'll call another wire function, and we'll pass the wire adapter, that is get object info, that will return us the object information with the metadata. So we'll say for which object you want to fetch the info. We'll say object API name is count object, and let's import that reference as well. Say import, and just copy this. We got the count reference, and here we'll use it as a property. So this property will get the information or the data, and once the object information comes, this will store the default record type ID under dot data dot default record type ID. So it will store at second level after data. So what we're gonna do is we'll copy this path, and we'll make this record type ID as reactive. I'll say dollar this. So whenever the object info receive the data, then only call this get picklist value and bring the picklist data for this record type ID and for a field industry field. So now we set up, and in the HTML we haven't done anything. Let's create the card quickly, and say title values demo, and just quickly add the class as well, that is padding class. Just to give the some padding around the card. And now pick list will come here simply as a placeholder. Let's go to the meta file and change it to true, and set the targets. We can set the target as record page or app page. Let's keep the app page only for time being, and let's deploy this sftx force colon source colon push. So I am in my app now. Under the app, I'm in the wire service page. Let's edit the page and place our component here. The left hand side, let's search for our component name, that is get pick list values demo. I dragged it here, I hit save. Let's go back and let's go to the console and see if the data is printing or not. This is our component name, get pick values demo. Let's open the object, let's zoom it. Now you see we are getting the values, and the value has the label and the value, right? So we want these two fields, basically labels and the value. And let's see how we can create the pick list on the UI. So I'll go to a combo box documentation of component reference. I select combo box, and if you see we have a syntax here. Let me zoom it a little bit. So we have a syntax here, lightning combo box. Just copy this. This is the approach that you're going to follow in the real time. Come here and paste it as it is. Let's go back there, and what's in the JS? In JS you have three things: value, get options, and handle change. Just copy that as it is and paste it below. Okay, so value is the value that you have selected in the combo box. So what we're gonna do is we'll change this value's name to, value is a very generic name, we'll change it to selected industry, and we'll replace this value selected industry and keep the first thing as empty only. Then we need the options. Options are in the form of label and the value. So the options will change this name to, we'll create another property here, we'll say industry options, and we initialize it with an empty array. I'll just comment it out because we need the syntax. And handle change is nothing on change, how to get the value, basically what you have changed in the pick list. And let's change the placeholder. We'll say select industry, and the label is industry, and we can change the name as well, industry. And for the option, we're gonna use what we have set here, industry options. So this is the syntax of lightning combo box. Basically we keep the name, label, value, placeholder. Placeholder is the text that is coming on the text box when nothing has been selected. Then the option is the list that you want to render. And on change, whenever you change or select a pick list, this action will trigger on change, and you immediately receive some data, and that data will come in the form of event detail.value. So we'll store, once the value come, we'll update our selected industry. Right now the only thing is we want our data from this data, basically that coming from the get pick list values adapter, and that should be in the form of label and the value. So what we're gonna do is, this is a very handy trick I'm teaching you, because in real time many use cases come with this trick. So always create a method called generate pick list, and this method will receive the data that is from the top. You can say here, we just call this method here generate pick list, and it will pass the data, it will receive the data, and once the data come, we have to generate the structure in this format, basically. Okay, and whenever we have to generate something, it means we have to transform the data, and whenever we have to transform the data, we have to use a map operation. What we're going to do is we'll say return data dot values dot map. So we are doing the map operation, and we are saying we need the data in this format, but this value will be dynamic. So this the value will be item dot label. this value will be item dot value. So you will think how I get to know whether data dot values will come or something else will come. So if I go back to our org and look at here, so data is the full object. Under that I have values. I'm running the map operation on these values, and each object is an item in our map, and from there I'm picking up the label and the value. That's what I'm doing here. I'm picking up the label and the value, and it will generate an array of object like this. And once this generation is done, it will return the data, and we'll store this into industry options. This industry option equal to, and we'll just do a copy. I don't want to update my field directly, and it's always good to move your all local properties to the top. And now our combo box or pick list is ready. Let's see. Let's deploy this. Now it's deployed. Let's go back and refresh the page. Now you can see that this select industry is the placeholder, industry is the label. And if I open it here, you can see the whole list is coming here. And if I select April, it will call the on change method and update our value here with the selected industry. We want to print so what we have selected, we can say selected industry as selected, and deploy this so we get to know which industry we are selecting. And refresh it again. Right now the selected industry is empty, and if I select April, it's April. Agriculture, so it's updating real time, and this is how you get the pick list value, and this is how you fetch the pick list from the org. And it's dynamic. We haven't wrote any single line of Apex to get this. Let's quickly add one more pick list just to make sure like things are working correctly with multiple pick lists. So let's add and import another pick list called type field. We already know the type field is available in the account object. So the field name is type. So we have the type field here. Like get object info, we don't have get object infos where you can pass multiple object API name. Here we have to call it separately. So what we're gonna do is we'll copy the whole thing again, and I'll paste it below, and I'll say second pick list of type. Okay, and it will take the same default record type ID dynamically, and here it should be field type, and I'll say here type pick list, and type pick list will data will come, it will call the generate pick list, and what we're gonna do here, we'll say type options. On the top I'll create the type options, and here I can say selected type, and I initialize it with the empty string, and we can add the on change handler here as well. They handle type change, and it will update the selected type. And in the HTML, we'll just copy this card again, and we'll say get pick list value demo with type. And here what I'm gonna do is update the name, label, selected industry becomes selected type, select type, and we'll say type options, handle type change, say selected type, and we'll print the selected type. Let's deploy this and see if second combo box is working fine or not. deployed. Let's refresh the page. Now you can see that we have two cards, one with the industry, second with the type. So now I select type, customer direct. So now it's updating customer direct here. If I select industry, it's showing industry. Likewise, in the account object, basically we have around 10-20 pick list fields. So if we have to import 4 or 5, it's not a good solution to call this wire get pick list value 5 times or 10 times. For that we have another solution, and that solution is another wire adapter, that is get pick list values wire record type. So we'll look into that in the next video.